Everyone, welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories, where we talk about some of the most haunted places in the South. I'm your host Chelsea, along with Alan.
Hello.
We hope you enjoyed our last podcast on the Enloe Center in Gallatin, Tennessee. If you're interested in finding out more information about the property or other haunted locations around Nashville, check out our Nashville Ghost Map app, which allows you to customize your own ghost tour along with our book's Southern Ghost Stories. Today, we're going back to New Orleans to talk about St. Louis Cemetery number 1. Alan, can you tell us about this historic cemetery?
After the Great Fire of 1788, the city of New Orleans needed a new cemetery. St. Louis Cemetery number 1 was built a year later in 1789 on some old swampy land just outside the city. Originally, the cemetery backed up to the back door of Our Lady Guadalupe across Basin Street, but over time, when roads were built, the cemetery became a little smaller. Originally, all remains in the late 18th century were buried underground, but due to New Orleans' high water table and ever-present flooding problems, in-ground burials are basically impossible. If you were to bury someone in the ground in New Orleans, it's more than likely the coffin would float back up to the surface. This is why in 1803, a city ordinance was mandated that all interments take place above ground.
Traditional family vaults could have been very small or large and extremely lavish. When someone in the family passed away, they were placed in an above-ground slot in the vault, which are also known as oven vaults. This is where the body is kept for a year and a day per tradition. In the New Orleans humidity, the bodies pretty much bake until day 366 when the bones and other remains are moved to the back of the vault. This is repeated after another member of the family dies.
In New Orleans, if someone dies, you notify the cemetery and they take off a piece of the tomb and push any remains from the vault to the very back where there's a small opening. That's where the remains fall to the ground and can be returned to the earth. Then you can put in the next body. You can't use a tomb for a year and a day. It was thought that after 365 days, the body would bake and decompose in the New Orleans heat. But it was believed that it was disrespectful to open a tomb on the day they were buried, so they wait an extra day, hence 366 days.
Today, St. Louis Cemetery number 1 has become the most famous or infamous burial ground in New Orleans and holds over 100,000 bodies and contains over 700 tombs. One notable person who was buried in the cemetery was William Claiborne. He was a politician who was a congressman from Tennessee, as well as a governor and senator from Louisiana. He was a controversial guy who was shot in the leg in a duel. When the infamous pirate Jean Lafitte was making a name for himself in New Orleans, Claiborne put a $500 bounty on his head. Not to be outdone, Lafitte put a $15,000 bounty on Claiborne's head. Lafitte didn't have to pay out on the bounty, as Claiborne died from a problem with his liver a short time later.
Other notable residents of St. Louis Cemetery number 1 include Voo Doo Queen Marie Laveau, civil rights pioneer Homer Plessy, Dauphine LaLaurie of the LaLaurie Mansion, and chess champion Paul Murphy. They were all interned in the cemetery. Actor Nicolas Cage also purchased a plot in the cemetery. Although Cage's career died sometime in the late 90s, his career was not buried there.
In 2010, Cage purchased 2 plots in St. Louis Cemetery number 1. He had a 9-foot-tall cement pyramid mausoleum. It was built to be his final resting place. In a sea of old crypts and tombs that are over 100 years old, Cage's pyramid really stands out. In fact, the pyramid has infuriated the locals, who have grown to hate the actor over the years. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005, the cemetery, which is only 8 blocks away from the Mississippi River, was largely unaffected by the winds and storms. But people broke into the cemetery and vandalized it. It was closed for a short time, but when it reopened, guards were put into place and you can only enter the burying ground with a tour guide.
Like a lot of other cemeteries, St. Louis Cemetery Number 1 is said to be incredibly haunted. One of those spirits is Henry Vignier. Henry was a soldier who lived in New Orleans, and he was somewhat of a nomad, and he was never in one place for long. But setting out on a trip, Henry went to the owner of his boarding house and asked him to hold on to the deed to his family's tomb in the cemetery. After Henry was gone for several weeks, his landlord assumed Henry had died and sold the tomb to someone else. Eventually, Henry came back home, but was unable to get his family's tomb back. He died a short time later, broke and penniless. Poor Henry was buried in an unmarked pauper's grave in the cemetery. Now, every so often, visitors to the cemetery will hear footsteps and see a man in an old sailor's outfit with blue eyes walking through the burying ground. And on a few occasions, he's also been captured in pictures taken in the cemetery. I visited St. Louis Cemetery Number 1 a few years ago, and it's a very interesting place. The first thing I noticed is that the walls and some of the tombs have sunk down into the ground. Also, unlike other cemeteries, there's no organization, and tombs and burial plots are right on top of each other. You will also see headstones and pieces of tombs that have been broken over the years just lying around. Nothing's thrown away because the cemetery never knows when a family member may stop by and want to repair their loved one's final resting place. Today, the cemetery has over 200,000 visitors each year. In fact, Marie Laveau's tomb gets more visitors than Elvis Presley's grave in Memphis, Tennessee. You can visit the cemetery too, but you have to take a guided tour with a licensed tour guide. So many people have vandalized tombs, grave markers, and other things in the cemetery, it's now mandated that you have a guide with you at all times. If you'd like to make St. Louis Cemetery Number 1 your final resting place and spend eternity with the Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau, they still have some room for around 40 or 50 grand. Just dig around in your couch cushions. You can probably find enough change there to make it work.
We hope you enjoyed our show about St. Louis Cemetery Number 1. If you would like to learn more about haunted locations in New Orleans, download the New Orleans Ghost Map app in iTunes and Google Play. Also, be sure to check out our website, southernghoststories.com, to check out our books. Feel free to leave a comment or send us a message on our Facebook or Instagram accounts. We'd love to hear about any creepy experiences you may have had, and we'd love to hear some ideas on new locations you'd like to hear about on future shows.
Now, those books Chelsea mentioned are Southern Ghost Stories, Historical Hauntings, Ghost of Gallatin, Murfreesboro, Spirits of Stones River, and Haunted Hotels. Please check out our Facebook page to find out details on our next event on October 30th at Nani's Bakery in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We have an event scheduled for October 23rd, but it's sold out in just a week or two, so we added a second date. Be sure to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Those reviews are very helpful, and we really appreciate everyone who's taken a few minutes to do it for us. Check back with us next time as we stay right here in New Orleans. Heck, we're even going to stick around St. Louis Cemetery Number 1 and discuss the gravesite of Marie Laveau.
Today, we're going to head back over to New Orleans to talk about St. Louis Cemetery. Traditional family vaults could have been small or large and very blah, 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 blah. Just something like that.
They could be blah, blah, blah.
Yep, they could be blah,
Just
blah,
like
blah,
you.
blah, blah. That wasn't very nice. In the New Orleans humidity, the bodies pretty much bake until 366. Wait, what? They bake at 366. It's like that's an unusual temperature.
But if you want it well done, you put it at 450.
In the New Orleans humidity, the baking the bodies. In the New Orleans humidity, the bodies pretty much bake. Why do you have it written that way? Why do you have them baking? Why do you have them baking?
Well, you can put them in a pot and make a stew.
Oh my God, you're terrible. This is terrible. In the New Orleans humidity, Alan's over here baking bodies at 366. Oh.
Take 84.
I just don't know why you have that written like that. In the New Orleans humidity, the bodies pretty much bake until day 366 when the bones and other remains are moved to the back of the vault.
I knew you could do it.
In the New Orleans humidity, the bodies pretty much bake. Okay. Get it together.
You could say broiled.
The bodies broil until day 366.
Or steam.
They steam.
They add some water in there.
They steam. That's what they do. They steam.
In New Orleans, if someone dies, you notify the cemetery, and they take off a piece of the tomb and push any remains from the vault to the very back where there's a small opening.
So they can fit in another body. I'm sorry.
You can't use a tomb for a year and a day. It was thought that after 365 days, the body would bake and decompose in the New Orleans heat.